Welcome to another episode of PBT Extra. Kurt Helin. I am so excited to hear your thoughts on basically everything. Tom Brady retired.
Yeah.
Brianna Stewart's now playing for the New York Liberty. But first and
Yeah.
foremost, how was your weekend?
Pretty good, pretty mellow actually. It's a little quiet leading up to trying to spend some time with the family and go see kids soccer games and stuff before I'm in Salt Lake for a few days for the All-Star game. So I mean, honestly, when it gets to this time of year, I'm busy with work and I don't, outside of going to games next week to watch LeBron break the record, which we'll talk about later, I'm not doing much. What about you, Corey? What have you been up to?
I've been in a weird spot artistically, Kurt. I just there was a time, I think if you logged it, there was like the Barbara Streisand moment that I had where I watched Funny Girl for the first time, and I told you I was in awe for 2 hours. Like I watched the movie. I was in bed watching the movie on my phone, and the credits ran. It went black screen. I just couldn't believe it. The end scene is one of my favorite scenes. That inspired me for weeks. I fed off of that for weeks. Then I went to the Met, and I found some paintings that inspired me for a few weeks. I went to London. I saw a whole room of Titians and a whole room of Van Goghs. That inspired me for weeks. But I'm coming off with a Van Gogh and Titian. It's just like a big precipice. Now there's just like nothing. I went back to the Met. I didn't really like the Danish art show. I didn't really like the Richard Avedon show. So I'm just kind of like, man, there's just nothing really inspiring me right now. I feel very, it's a dark winter right now, artistically for me.
Are you saying, Corey, your highs aren't lasting quite as long, and you've got to find more now? Is that the?
No, it's just I just need to watch something that's beautiful. That's all I ask.
You will find it. You will find it. There is stuff out there beyond just basketball. There is beautiful stuff out there.
Yeah, I think it's curious. There's this one. Maybe I should go back to opera. Opera's always all reliable for me. So that's what I do, Kurt. I think you inspired me. The Met Opera, I haven't been there in a few months. Last show I saw there was Medea. So I think I need to go, because whenever I need to see something beautiful, I always go to the opera, and it always is a trick for me.
I was just setting up stuff with friends to go see the Met in a theater. They broadcast them to movie theaters out here in the West. So I was just setting that up with a friend the last weekend. So
look at that. Okay, now let's get into basketball. Enough talk of opera. Let's go into.
We've lost all our viewers.
Yeah. Okay. So LeBron James is right there. He's 38 points to tie, 39 to break.
89.
Oh, sorry. Excuse me. You're right. 89 points to break Kareem's all-time scoring record. It's going to happen in the next couple of weeks. He just scored a 28-point triple-double. When that moment happens, what are your projections? When is that moment going to happen? What game?
First off, you can find all this we've got a tracker up at NBC Sports, keeping track of how far away he is and projecting. The current projections are right on the bubble. Technically, he will do it. He could do it if he follows he's averaging 30.2 points a game. So 89 points would be 3 games out. It would be against Oklahoma City at home next Tuesday night. Except that's right on the bubble, right? Like 1 20-point game or something. They're at home that following Thursday against the Bucks, which would be not only on national television, but kind of appropriate, right? Against Kareem's old original team, the Milwaukee Bucks. There's something poetic about that. So my gut feeling is that's the game. But we've been trying to predict this around, people in the Laker locker rooms have had these conversations. And it's like, the problem is if he takes his foot off the gas to try to target a game or make sure he's home, they lose. They needed to rest him back to back. They decided to rest him against him and Anthony Davis against the Nets. It's a loss, and a bad loss. Like, I don't know, Corey. It could come earlier just because he's got to put up numbers for them to win.
I mean, that overtime win to have to play that well against the Knicks to win, like you're saying, in overtime. It's just kind of like, what else? It's like that classic, picture of someone just like, what else do you need me to do? like what else do I need to do to help this team win? So yeah, I see what you're saying. And with the calls too, and the Lakers are an interesting spot because there's been a lot of talk about officiating and the NBA's last 2-minute report that they put out. And you look at some of those Laker games, I've counted somewhere around 5 games that could have gone either way if they got the right call, right? So I mean, what they believe was the right call. Let me excuse myself. So if that's the case, I mean, the West is so compact, it's you can really flip the script for them in the postseason.
Yeah, I think that's where their margin for error is. That there's actually 4 games, including one in Dallas, one in Sacramento, that they're really kind of upset about. but they also get a lot of calls. Like when you look at the macro scene, they kind of benefit from the whistle a little. That said, it's just where these Lakers are. They have to scrap and fight for everything. They need those. That would have been a huge win against a very good Celtics team in Boston, but they need all the breaks. And it should have been a foul, don't get me wrong, but like they need all the breaks to go their way to have a chance so many nights. So you can see the emotion on LeBron to kind of will this team into the postseason. And by the way, I think the most, and what we're writing about this, I think this will come out at the end of this week or early next week at NBC Sports. The condition he has kept his body in to do this at age 38 and be, I mean, still clearly a top 10 player in the league, right?
Yes. You mentioned that you're writing this article about his LeBron James's his ability to just be in great shape for a long period of time. You know, when did that begin? Because I feel like there's always this origin story where there's like a young kid who realizes, hey, I could be great.
It's a funny thing. He talked about that specifically, and I think it's one of the best quotes in the story. He says, look, I realized where my career could be headed and what I could be. He was stretching every morning and every night when he got up in the morning and then before he went to bed in high school. Before he was going to bed, he was icing by his rookie year, which guys don't do. Guys don't ice after games. He was icing and doing this kind of stuff early on, thinking about the long term. Now it helps. Look, he won the genetic lottery, right? Like he's, you know, let's be honest here. He's been given the gift, but there's a lot of people got given gifts that didn't take care of them, and he has more than done that. And I think Greg Popovich talked about it when he was in town, and Doc Rivers talked about it. Everybody else has kind of seen it too. It's and Darvin Ham talks about his commitment to professionalism all the time. Like that's, you know, it's a lead by example thing. Like if you want to be like me, like nobody's working harder than me. And I think he saw some of that from Kobe back in the day when they were on the Olympic teams together. And Kobe's the first guy in the gym getting in a full workout before the practice. Like it rubs off on guys.
Being in that environment certainly does. And Anthony Davis also was very vocal about just like the professionalism as far as taking care of your body is concerned when he joined the Lakers and was like learning about LeBron and sitting in ice tubs and learning all those things from him. Could you imagine Bronny, by the way, you know, LeBron's son, like I bet, when did he start stretching in middle school?
Yeah.
You know, like this is like the next step because Kareem.
Plus, hey, I've got LeBron has some of those ice, you know, I don't know the term for them, but the tanks you step into that freeze you for like 30 seconds. Man, you didn't have those at home when you were playing high school ball, right?
I did not. But then think about this. Neither did Kareem. So this is what I think is so interesting because you have, you know, like LeBron, he's right there, right? We talk about 88 points to tie, 89 to break, 20-year career. He's in year 20. Kareem was in year 20, right, when he retired. And it's funny because you look at like how athletes train now. You know, it's just different. You have trainers, you have chefs, you have shooting coaches, you have just like basically you have to invest in your body. One, you have the money to invest in your body. Like the salaries are such that you can spend, you know, hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars on your own fitness. Whereas in that age, it was not. Yeah. And the second piece too is Kareem has more mileage on him too. I mean, he played 4 years of college. So you think also this is an interesting kind of question. Of like one, how the game's evolved, you know, was Kareem shooting 3-pointers? Two, the college years, how that affected him. But then to be able to think, well, if Dennis Schroeder's comments are correct and LeBron does want to play Tom Brady long into 45, 46, 44, then I mean, this could be it could take people another 20, 40 years to do this, to break it.
It's funny. You talk to, there's been stories about this recently, but if you talk to people around that watched Kareem, the Pat Riley's of the world, he was doing yoga back in the day when nobody was thinking about flexibility, when nobody was thinking about strength and flexibility combined. He was way ahead of that curve, and I think that helped lengthen him out in an era where another former Lakers Showtime guy, and now they're a television color commentator out here, Michael Thompson, former number 1 pick, Michael Thompson out of Minnesota. They used to mock him because he'd work out between games. Like he'd go in the weight room and lift weights. And like, dude, nobody lifts weights. Why are you lifting weights? Magic Johnson, all these guys would kind of mock him. Now guys go lift after games, right? Like it's amazing how much that has we've learned, and the evolution has happened in terms of generally players taking care of their bodies.
Yeah, and it's funny because you mentioned this. The early adopters are the ones, who have the uphill battle. But I've been around enough Olympians and enough champions to realize that a lot of them are they're like these scientists. Like I'm reading this book about Alexander von Humboldt right now, who was a German polymath and explorer and all this stuff. He was friends with like Johann von Goethe. I don't know if you listen, read Goethe's books or whatever, but he wrote Faust. So it's just like listening to the way that this guy thought about, the game, thought about just like it was such an interesting and almost like shocking way to approach science, because he looked at it from a holistic standpoint as opposed to, individual silos. But, at first, people thought he was dumb for asking so many questions. Like he would ask the most simple questions, but they didn't understand that he was asking them in context of a whole system. Yeah. And it's like the same kind of things when you look at people who are like champions or Olympians. They'll be doing things that it doesn't make any sense to anybody else, but it's because that you don't have the proper context. Like you're not looking at it the same way that they are. And generally the Olympic champions and the NBA champions that I've met who are just excellent, who are like above and beyond like GOAT status, they think of the game differently. They usually invert it where it's like it's almost like it's very counterintuitive the way that they approach the game. But yeah, they're always like the early adopters. It's very fascinating.
By the way, I should throw out there, I talked about Michael Thompson, and I left out the one way everybody actually knows him. He's Clay's dad. Like I should throw that in there.
Yeah, very the lead.
I forget he had this. He's got rings on his own. He's done all this stuff, but he's Clay's dad. Like that's how everybody actually knows him now.
Yeah. So anyways, it's very interesting. We'll see exactly when. It could be at home. It could be, on the road. We'll see. And I'm sure
I got a feeling it's going to be one of the two games at home next week. We'll see.
We'll see. Okay, so this is interesting, just kind of pivoting it to put that into context. I mentioned that earlier. We talked about, the innovation, technology context, what that looks like and how that's always changing. But let's think about a young Luka, right? And you think, okay, well, 20 years ago, who could even pass this record? Maybe you've anointed LeBron James. If you're looking at today, right now, in the NBA, who do you think that you would anoint maybe in 20 years they could potentially pass this record? And this is, it's hard. It's a hard question.
I got a feeling that person's not in the NBA. Like nothing against Luka, but when Luka was asked, his response was kind of like, yeah, playing 20 years. I don't know about that. And he's done a much better job of starting to physically take care of himself over the last couple of years. It would take somebody like that though, right? You've got to come into the league young, be scoring and putting up numbers from day one. And then, we were talking about the conditioning and the physicality, like avoiding major injury that knocks you out for 6 months or a year and causes you to miss most of a season. LeBron really hasn't had that. It takes a lot of things and a little luck, I think. And I'm not sure that's Luka, and I'm not sure I can think of anybody like coming up like Wembanyama. Is he going to play that line? I mean, we're way too early on him to know that kind of thing. I just don't see who that person is. But then again, when LeBron entered the league, would we have thought, as great as he was and as quickly as he became great, we've thought he's going to play for 20 years at this level. I'm not sure who it is.
Question. Because, like the record when Kareem passed Wilt, that was back in 1984, if I'm not mistaken, right? So, I mean, it's been almost 40 years. So you might be right. It may not be this generation. It may be the one after.
It might be. I mean, it's somebody who's going to come in and handle the pressure, by the way. LeBron Jr. in high school on the cover of Sports Illustrated is the chosen one. Like, that's a lot of hype to live up to. And, Gretzky did it. There's certain players who have been able to handle that over the years. This isn't the Tom Brady story where he's the 6th round pick. I mean, and this was more secretariat where everyone knew he was great before he, stepped on the track.
Yeah, but I mean, it's the same thing with Kareem. I mean, you hear about the way that people talk about Kareem at Power Memorial High. They was like, this guy is like a high schooler that people knew. He's like the future of basketball. You hear Jerry West talk about it, Pat Riley talk about it. Like everyone knew this kid was just touched by heaven. Yeah,
and these stories out of UCLA. Remember, he couldn't play as a freshman under the rules at the time. He could not play. and the freshman team used to beat the NCAA championship varsity team in scrimmages.
So I mean, the legend aspect, like we only get a few of those every, generation. Someone to get like that level of immediate greatness. Wembanyama is interesting because people around the league, immediately they know this guy. Of course, he's number one overall. They know he has the potential to be great. However, we've seen that body type, Kevin Durant type of body type, Chet Holmgren type of body type. You are injury prone, so it be done as a 7-something foot shooter? Who knows? But I think you're right. I think it's going to be someone in the next generation who is going to just be like, it's very clear, like you are anointed, just like Kareem, just like LeBron, where in high school, this guy is going to be, he's the one.
Yeah, exactly. We're going to know early on, and then we'll start breaking it down way too early on. Then we'll decide he's a failure way too early on. Greg Popovich, when I asked you, it's another story coming out next week. Got angry about how LeBron was treated early in his career for passing up. Michael would have never passed up that shot. It was vintage Popovich when he gets on a roll.
Oh man! So speaking of this is interesting. We're talking about generational talents. Brianna Stewart. I mean,
yes,
amazing. I mean, I watched her play in Tokyo live, and I just couldn't believe it. I mean, she has lost only a handful of college games like in her lifetime. She won 4 national championships. Like she was one of the most decorated college players of all time. Then she went to the WNBA. Immediately, translated that success. It's clear she's one of the best players in the league, and now she made one of the biggest moves in WNBA free agency history. And there were a few teams involved. Right. But now we've seen her come back home. She's from Syracuse. She went to school, as I mentioned, at UConn. Now she's going to play for the New York Liberty alongside Sabrina Ionescu, the number 1 overall draft pick from a couple years ago, and Jonquel Jones, who was MVP for the Connecticut Sun. I mean, this is like a super team. To challenge Las Vegas is super team.
It's funny because we are like, man, earlier this week when Las Vegas got Candace Parker, we were like, yeah, they still got Kelsey Plum. They got Aja, like
Asia Wilson is like,
that is a superpower team. How is anybody going to knock them off? And then here come the Liberty. That's like, I can't wait for those games now. That is just, I'm a fan in general in sports, not just basketball, but in general. I like super teams and then teams trying to knock them off. I like that. Hey, who's going to beat the Montana 49ers, right? Like I want that target to aim at for everyone else. Now we got 2 of them in the WNBA. That is going to be a fun season. And, we'll see how the season shakes out. There's some other quality teams out there as well.
Yeah. But I think what we have here, Kurt, is the Magic versus, Larry Bird. Like that's what I think, in my personal opinion, you look at, you need rivalries. You need great rivalries. I'm talking like 2 dominant teams going head to head for a long period of time, right? And what you have here, I know Candace Parker's older, but the thing is, Asia Wilson is like, she is like Holmes, like when you talk about a transcendent generational player, Asia Wilson's that player, right? And then people believe that Sabrina Ionescu can be great. She was, sidelined with injuries, but people believe that she can be great as well. So to think Wilson versus Ionescu, and then you have Jonquel Jones, MVP caliber, Chelsea Gray, finals MVP, and you have Kelsey Plum, and then of course, like Brianna Stewart and Candace Parker being kind of like the Kareem, to Magic. Like it's kind of like this crazy concept that we are watching like the creation of the Lakers Celtics rivalry in real time with the Liberty and the Aces.
By the way, the Ionescu Stewart pick and roll, have fun with that. How are you going to defend that?
Could you imagine?
Good luck. But I think that this is, and it kind of gets into another topic. This is an opportunity for the WNBA with this rivalry, with the attention. We're talking about it. Other sports shows are talking about it. When you have that kind of attention, I feel like you have to invest. You have to grab it. You have to take advantage of these moments, like David Stern understood how to do with Magic and Bird. Like you've got to grow the sport in these moments when you have the opportunity. And I think part of that is something Brianna Stewart talked about. It's quality of play tied. It's getting charter flights for WNBA players, which is right now they are legally bound through the CBA to fly commercial during the regular season. They during the finals last year, they booked charter flights, but in general, these players, high-level players, all fly commercial, and it's anybody who's flown commercial will tell you that wear you out and drag it down pretty quick. Brianna's pushing for charter flights, and I think you'd agree that that's a direction I feel like the WNBA needs to find a way to go.
Yes. It's interesting because this is, there's nothing new under the sun. Back in the early 90s, 1991, I love history. I was reading the open letter my dad, David Robinson, wrote to the Spurs owner at the time, Red McCombs, about this exact same issue. My dad was arguing it was an open letter in the San Antonio Express News and the San Antonio Light. He was arguing that the connecting flights and being able, having to leave the hotel earlier puts them at a distinct disadvantage if they're competing for a championship. The team is just too good, for them not to have the same type of resources that the other teams that are the best teams in the league had. And it did result in changes. But it is an interesting question. Like that was the question for small market teams in the early 1990s in the NBA. 30 years later, this is the question, not only for small market teams, but for the entire league. Like this is the question for the WNBA generally. So it's interesting to see that lag as the time delay. But like you're right, I think the first and foremost, one, you have the rivalry, with the WNBA, right? You had Sue Bird and Diana Taurasi, and now it's very clear that you're investing in the next generation of stars. Wonderful, right? That's kind of like Bill Russell versus Wilt Chamberlain, right? Or Jerry West. Like you had that early kind of like ground for the beginning of the league. Now we're into the Magic Larry kind of like Showtime era, which is going to be crazy and awesome. And so the Olympic dominance that the WNBA players have as well is just crazy and awesome.
Yeah.
So like it's going to be like a really special time, and I don't know, what exactly that looks like, but Kathy Engelbert has to figure it out, like you're saying, because this is the moment. The iron is hot, and she looks like she's very invested in trying to make sure that they take full advantage of this. I
hope so. I mean, this has been a league. Sometimes I think it ends up being penny wise and pound foolish. It's $30 million a year estimated to book charter flights for every team in the league, and I don't know. That's not a small chunk of change, definitely for the WNBA. But on the flip side of that, I look, you played football at Notre Dame, and I imagine you flew charter everywhere.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, obviously you're talking about like 6 flights, whatever, because, we only play 10, 12 games, but I get your point. And I think the thing is this bodes very well for the WNBA. One, looking at the history of the NBA, just generally, like I mentioned, like also with pay scales and free agency and like all that jazz that it's all in the history books, like set up this current, just crazy bonkers salaries right now. But the other thing is the fact that the WNBA owners, they're willing to spend, it looks like, the new generation of WNBA owners, right? Like, I think that's going to be a huge game changer for the WNBA.
And I think that they're on the right track. I think to grow this sport, like this is where you invest, and charter flights is one part of that, but this is where you invest in the marketing and the opportunities, especially, Las Vegas is a pretty sexy city, but you're in New York City, man. Like this is your opportunity in the biggest media market in the nation and one of the biggest in the world to really explode this thing. So hopefully we get to see that. By the way, speaking of guys, Corey, having a kind of explosive season, Damian Lillard, under the radar lately, has just been dominant his last 10 games. Dropped 50 the other day at 43. He is having this season, and he is the focus of your Corey's Jukebox this week, which I'm kind of excited about because he is not only a great tune, by the way, but like I don't think people are talking enough about how good a year Dame Lillard's quietly having up in Portland because they just haven't been great as a team.
Yes. The song "Don't Sweat the Technique" by Eric B. and Rakim. First of all, you gotta pay homage to the greats in hip hop. We're paying homage to Kareem, we're paying homage to LeBron. Like if we're gonna bring up hip hop as a genre, we gotta bring up Eric B. and Rakim. Like we have to. Secondly, this song, the reason why I chose this song is because the way that Damian Lillard scored 60 against Utah, the way was so efficient. I would use the word hyper efficient. I think that's one word. There's a hyphen there, I guess. Hyper efficient. That is clinical. That's surgical. And there are very few players who can do that. And also, you look at I think he hit 9 3-pointers, if I'm not mistaken. But like you look at the free throws, like it's not like he took 25 free throws.
No.
Like, and that's how a lot of people get to that level. Is you get fouled a lot,
Yeah.
right? You slow down the game, and you get a lot of free buckets, and so like there are ways to kind of get there, right? But one is a huge free throw. To be that precise from the floor is like Rakim being that precise, in the bars, with the meter, with the rhyme schemes. Like he doesn't miss.
Yeah, that's actually a great analogy and a great song. That I don't believe have the rights to overplay it, or we would, but yeah, that would be. I don't think NBC's popping for that one, but it's that's actually a great analogy because I think he's been through his whole career. I mean, he's had to be efficient, right? Because obviously he's physically gifted, but he's not. I think one of the fun things about watching him, and John Morant had this, and going back to Iverson and others, is athletic and talented as they are, like you can imagine yourself as Damian Lillard in the way you can't imagine yourself being LeBron James. Like LeBron, none of us were born 6'8", 250 with lightning speed, right? Like none of us were built like Kevin Durant. It's a little harder to envision yourself there, but you can picture yourself as Damian Lillard, right? Like he's not. I mean, he's not short. He's 6'3", officially 6'2", 6'3", but he's not overwhelmingly tall or just like John Morant has a little of that, and then you watch him jump, you're like, yeah, no, nobody. Where's the trampoline on the floor? Like, I don't get how they're doing this. That's never quite been Lillard. He's just been with the Weber State, man. And I think that's that underdog mentality makes him just easy to love.
He's also a rapper.
Yes, he is.
So that's why I also chose rap. We got to like go the art history of rap as an art form. I'm not a huge fan of rap and hip hop, to be completely honest with you, but I studied the game, and that's kind of another tie-in. I think you're kind of. It's an interesting point you make. The relatability of him in the way that he plays, but also you don't become one of the 75 greatest players of all time, by by doing nothing, right? So like I think that everyone who's on that list did something for the league that was extraordinary, obviously, and they all have unique skill sets, right? The thing that is interesting about Damian Lillard, right, is not necessarily his range. And I understand like range is important. You're probably going to add in, Steph Curry for like the guy with range, right? There are some young guns trying to challenge that. But I don't think range from shooting distance is Damian Lillard's thing. Like I think you hit it on the head. I think it's efficiency. That is, it's crazy, how efficient he is.
Yeah, he is very good at getting to his spots and knowing what he can and can't. He has the range if you leave him.
Yeah, he definitely has the range, but I don't think it's like the one defining thing. Because like people like certain aspects where you're like, okay, well, he was a great rebounder, or like, oh, this guy was a physical specimen, 7-footer and could run like a deer. Like so like there are certain things that like everyone has like their one calling card. Karl Malone was so strong, like strong, exactly. And he was so consistent for so long. I think Damian Lillard's is going to be his efficiency, and it's remarkable to be that efficient for that long.
And a guy who's been committed to Portland, which I think it's great for the league in general to see players kind of committed to their city, committed to their team. Nothing against player movement and the kind of what drives the business sometimes, and certainly right now around trade time. But I love guys who've been, hey man, I'm going to be loyal. This is where I want to be. I like it here. I want to win here.
Speaking of trade deadline,
yeah,
what's going on, Kurt? Fill us in.
We are 8 days away as we record this from the trade deadline next Thursday, February 9th. We'll just, I'll just run through some of the big ones. I know we were just talking about Luka not that long ago. Dallas has they're basically looking for their second star. It's Dorian Finney-Smith, who they were shooting down when everybody called. He's available for the right, but like they want a star package player back. The problem is, Corey, what could really do this trade deadline in as a spectator is there isn't a star available. There's nobody. It's kind of quiet. And I'll tell you, that's why everybody's watching the Raptors right now. Toronto hasn't really decided what they're going to do at the deadline. They're pseudo listening to talks, but they haven't decided. If they come in and Fred VanVleet and OG Anunoby and maybe Pascal Siakam become available, then this is a really interesting trade deadline, and there are teams lined up waiting. And those are guys, we're talking about like the Clippers need a point guard. And there maybe Mike Conley went. Fred VanVleet's the guy who changes that, right? Like Fred VanVleet's the guy you can be that guy for a while for you.
Yes, but out of that list, if you stick with Dallas, like you said, if you're
Yeah.
thinking, okay, Dallas needs a superstar,
Oh,
they need an All-NBA type of player. If there's no one available, that's unfortunate. Like, but if there is someone on that list that you mentioned, to me, Siakam,
Oh yeah,
I
no,
would actually, that's like an interesting thing because I think they tried Porzingis, it didn't work.
yeah,
And then if they get someone like a Fred VanVleet, to me, that's just another Jalen Brunson. So like I think you already
yeah.
played out that experiment. But a Siakam, an All NBA level guy
Oh, yeah.
like that next to that could be interesting.
Now, Siakam would be the best fit of all of them. The problem is Dallas has kind of backed themselves into a corner. They don't have a lot of cap space, so they can't get at these guys as free agents. Going to have to do a sign and trade or of some kind, and they don't have a lot of. I mean, there's just not a lot of guys on that roster. Teams are Dorian Finney-Smith's the exception, Christian Wood, but there's not a lot of guys on that roster people are excited about. They can trade, I think, 3 or 4 first-round picks, which would help because you're going to have to. But they're at that point now. They like that. Look, if it's not Pascal Siakam, and it's not, we can speculate about other free, superstar free agents who could come available. There's always those rumblings. People are always watching. Hey, is Karl Anthony Towns happy? Is Joel Embiid happy? Like everybody's always watching.
We've seen a lot of coups.
Yeah, Dallas has to do whatever it takes to get the next one of those guys who comes available. They have to put somebody like that next to, or you're I don't want to say you're wasting Luka's prime, but you're not utilizing it. And by the way, yeah, he's in the first year of that 5-year deal, but you got a couple of years. The clock's always ticking when you got a superstar.
Yeah, I mean, he's 23 though, Kurt. So the prime is probably a 28 to 32. But yeah, I see your point. And if I've known anything about sports, it's that a contract means nothing, especially if you're a superstar. You can force your way out anytime.
Yeah, I don't think that's Luka. I don't think he's looking to yet. But if they're this team 2 years from now, that dynamic could change. I'll tell you some guys I think you will see moved. Bones Highland's name has come up a lot in the last few days. The Denver Nuggets backup point guard. He's not happy there. He wants more minutes somewhere else. Second year, solid backup point guard. A little drives coach there, Michael Malone, a little bit nuts, but I think could fit in. If you're a young team looking for some point guard minutes, he's a guy who could fit in and grow with you. He's certainly got the talent. Another name to watch, and we've been watching him all year, Corey, is Jay Crowder. The Jay Crowder market is still out there. The Heat are still interested, but the Bucks seem to be the front runner. They have reportedly been the only team who've been allowed to talk to him about setting what's up. So, I mean, doesn't he seem like he'd be the kind? I mean, they miss PJ Tucker in Milwaukee, even though they've been playing better. Doesn't getting Jay Crowder kind of give you PJ Tucker light?
Yeah, I mean, I think Crowder is probably. I mean, I think he's a very good fit for that team. You look at like what is a Milwaukee Buck. Like I think that he fits the bill if he feels valued, because I thought that in a Monty Williams Suns team, I'm like, oh, that's like he's bringing that Miami Heat type of culture over there. Like he fits that bill as well. Like, hey, I need perimeter defense, I need shooting. I feel like he would have been a good fit there until he got unhappy and wanted to trade. So it is an interesting question, but I think on a short-term kind of deal, yeah, I feel like if he is willing to go back and accept a role, I think he'd be a good fit there.
I think he knows his role. I think you hit the nail on the head. It's that next contract. He wanted a PJ Tucker money after sitting out this year. I don't think he can get that. I'm kind of surprised PJ Tucker got that, but I say that, and then PJ Tucker goes out and takes an MVP front runner Jokic out of the second half of a game this week and reminds everybody, like, hey, this is why you got me. When it's 16 games and you got to beat Jokic at the end, like, I'm a guy who can do this for you. Like, he's got such value, and Crowder can kind of bring some of that. Two teams that watch as sellers really quick outside of waiting for the Raptors. Charlotte is definitely open. You want Terry Rozier, Kelly Oubre. The team everybody's really talking to, though, is, and I can't believe more first-round picks are going to be moving. It's Danny Ainge and the Utah Jazz. Mike Conley is available. Malik Beasley, Jordan Clarkson, pretty much anybody. Lauri Markkanen's not going anywhere. They love their rookie Walker Kessler. Don't ask, not available. But in general, pretty much everyone on that roster otherwise is available. And I think you'll see movement, but I'm going to let you in. Danny Ainge might hold out for some extra picks, Corey.
Yeah, I mean, look, we knew there's going to be a rebuild there, and I was waiting for them to
Yeah.
just cut up that team. And
They're still, the thing is, they're still 500. Like through all of this, like you kept like, we thought they'd bottom out this year and trade everybody off and it'd be a fire sale, but they look like a play-in team.
yeah, and I wonder if that's good or bad. I don't know.
Yeah, that's actually a legitimate good question.
Yeah, I mean, because I feel like on one hand, new ownership, new regime. If you can say, look, despite everything we went through, there's still hope. Potentially, that's a good thing, And it shows that the ownership is willing to be like, hey, look, we're not just gonna, play the lottery game. Okay, I understand that. However, you also have to think strategically. Are you really going to build a team around Markkanen and Kessler?
No.
And that's like, and this is a hard question to ask, but you have to ask yourself as an owner, as a GM, like, well, what is our best bet? What are we thinking for the future? If the answer is no, then Markkanen is like playing at an all-star level right now. This is probably going to be peak of his value, and being an NBA all-star is a huge deal, right? So like, that's a great thing. Do what the Spurs did and, get him on the market like DeJounte Murray, peak all-star value, move him when you can. So like you have to make the decision. And I feel like the Utah Jazz might be shooting themselves in the foot here, Kurt.
Yeah. And by the way, I think you're right on Markkanen being all-star level. They announced the reserves on Thursday. I'd be shocked if he is not the Jazz representative for the home team in Salt Lake City, which always leads to the fun question of who gets more cheers, LeBron or the hometown hero. It's usually pretty close.
A toss up. It's always a toss up. Okay. Anything else we need to know about with the trade deadline before you wrap up?
I just say look. Bojan Bogdanovic and both Bogdanoviches, Bogdan and Bojan are both available. But watch the Raptors. If the Raptors get involved, it's going to be interesting. If the Raptors don't get involved, Jay Crowder could be the best player traded, maybe John Collins.
It's very interesting. That Raptors. I remember when we were, when was this, Kurt? A couple of years ago, we were like waiting. There were a couple of blockbuster trades happening. We're like, okay, once Kevin Durant makes a decision or once James Harden makes a decision, everything else, it will unlock.
That domino,
So it's the same kind of thing with the Raptors, I assume, in this trade deadline.
Yeah, and they may ultimately decide that even if they want to blow it up, they might wait till the summer when they feel less pressure to do it under the deadline. So.
Okay, so now we just finished up rivalry week in the NBA. So this is a question from our producer Dan. If you could go a rivalry, you could be a part of it, or you would watch, just be there in person to see it, any era, any time, which is kind of fun. Which rivalry and what sport would you want to be there to see or be a part of? I'm going to throw that in too. It'd be fun to be a part of one.
I've been fortunate to see a few. I've been to one you were personally involved in. I have been to multiple Notre Dame USC games, which is a fantastic kind of cross-nation rivalry. One of the best football memories I've ever had is watching Jerome Bettis carry like 4 Trojans into the end zone one year. We were right at the front of the Notre Dame section and saw it. Like, you're like, Jerome. That was one of those places where like Jerome Bettis is just bigger and stronger than everyone else I've ever met. I've seen with basketball, obviously, I've been fortunate to see Lakers Celtics and in the finals and all this stuff. But if the one I could go to, the one I'd want to see, as much as I'm a soccer guy and a Newcastle fan, and we're watching beat up on Sunderland or something, I want to go to a Classico.
Yeah,
I want to just be in the stands and watch Barcelona take on Real Madrid. To me, that seems just like the ultimate soccer experience.
Yeah, for me, the ultimate soccer experience would be Brazil, Argentina in the World Cup. That would be unbelievable. It's one of my favorite rivalries of all time. So to see that play out, and that would be like my dream. Then, or to be a part of it. Hey, I could be a reserve. I could be a goalie. I'm tall. Who knows? The other thing I think would be really fascinating is Oxford, Cambridge rowing.
Oh, wow.
That is that's a huge deal. So I would love to see or be a part of Oxford, Cambridge rowing.
Do you ever go up to the races on the Charles up in Boston?
Yeah, so I've never been to the races on the Charles, or it's funny. Yeah. I think Oxford, Cambridge row on the Thames. Can you imagine?
I believe they do. I believe that is true.
And to think about, I was looking at some of these videos and pictures of regattas in the early 1900s. 60,000 people be going to these things, 70,000 people. It
Yeah.
was like crazy. So like, could you imagine like in the 1910s or 1900s, 1930s, going to see Oxford, Cambridge on the Thames in London with 60,000 people?
Oh,
And then
that,
my last one, I feel like, because, I was a part of this, and I'm just going to bring it up. Notre Dame, Michigan has to be one of my favorite
oh,
rivalries of all
really?
time.
Was
It's so
that,
great.
is that it's great energy in and Ann Arbor seems like a place to be a really entertaining place to see a game.
Well, I mean, so my freshman year, my second game ever in college was at Michigan, and it was at the time was the largest game as far as attendance is concerned of all time. I think we had over 115,000 people, and I believe it was the first night game ever at the Big House. So that was my introduction. That was my second game. I had my first catch in that arena, and it was so loud that I couldn't hear anything. I would be sitting right next to somebody on the bench. I couldn't hear anything, and like the actual stadium was shaking. And like so for me, Michigan, Notre Dame, Michigan is like under the lights is unbelievable. It's like one of the best rivalries.
That's awesome. Yeah, I'm not topping that story.
And with that, then I guess we're gonna wrap it up. Hey, I can't wait to see how this all shakes out next week with the NBA trade deadline. And it's the Raptors. Everything is right now is centered in Toronto.
Yep. The NBA world is watching Toronto and waiting.